An early spring day in the Eastern Cape and topping the bill at the Engine Audi race day at Aldo Scribante in Port Elizabeth, runs 13 and 14 of the Bankfin Touring Car Championship. Into the qualifying session for round 13, and the focus is on the privateers, with George Besaidnout fourth fastest in the red Nissan Engine Exchange Centre, with championship leader Mark Peters third in the Duxbury Modems BMW. A bit of a surprise there, with a consistent British driver upstaged by Garth Wabashki in the big DAW Toyota Camry. After plenty of development work on the Camry, Wabashki came alight with the second fastest time. An encouraging performance for the DAW team, but they could not stop Dos Santos from taking pole amongst the privateers in the Duckham's Nissan Sentra.
Yeah, well, we've developed the car tremendously. We found quite a lot of horsepower, and we found a lot in the suspension changes and that type of thing. It's taken a long time being at the new Toyota Camry. Last year we raced the Corolla, and we definitely think we found something in the Camry that seems to be working.
Scribante is home turf for the three factory engine Audi entries, and teammates Moss and Taylor were 4th and 5th on the grid, but early problems for Duncan Voss, with the BP Nissan Primera stopping out on the circuit during qualifying. Matters were looking good for the Sasol BMW team, with Sean van der Linde setting the third fastest time on a circuit that wasn't kind to the mid-run squad earlier in the season. Van der Linde was only 0.03 of a second behind championship leader Janil de Villiers in the second BP Nissan Primera, and BMW's Cup raneth over when local hero Mike Briggs scored his first pole position of the season. Father Gordon was one of the first to offer congratulations. A welcome return to form then for Briggs, and only 0.03 of a second between the first four cars, and less than a second between Briggs and privateer Marco Dos Santos in 6th place.
For me personally, it's really a weight off my shoulders. You know, I've known that the car is capable, especially at this circuit. PE is my home circuit, so I really want to always do well in PE. But this is just a case of months of dedication. The team have just worked. They've kept the faith in me when I've not been there all the time for them. They've kept faith in me. And finally, I think it's starting to pay off now. We have a good car. I'm comfortable in it. I'm enjoying driving it. So this is new territory for me.
So, some anxious faces in the Nissan pits before qualifying for round 14, with the early focus again on the privateers. This time around, Garth Wabashki and Mark Peters changed places, with Wabashki third fastest in the DAW Toyota Camry and Peters second in the Duxbury Modems BMW. And guess what? That meant another pole position for Marco Dos Santos in the Duckham's Nissan Sentra, who was just a little surprised at the turn of events.
We don't normally do very well here because of the tyre wear in Port Elizabeth, but this weekend's been very good. We struggled a bit in the first qualifying. We hadn't tried new tyres, so the setup changed a bit when we went out for qualifying. But the second one, we got it pretty much right. Messed up a little bit on my qualifying lap, but we're there. There's half a second between pole and myself, so I think it's going to be an excellent race.
The local enthusiasts and the Engine Audi team had something to get excited about when Terry Moss, another local boy, came up with the third fastest time amongst the factory entries. Duncan Voss was back in business after his first session woes to claim second place in the BP Nissan Primera, with the Sasol BMW squad's impressive form continuing, with pole position going to the 1994 Touring Car champion Sean van der Linde. Van der Linde at the top of the heap, with times again desperately close. This time just over a second separated the first 8 cars on the grid. The cars out on the formation lap for round 13 of the Bankfin Touring Car Championship, and another quick look at the grid. Pole position for the first time this season for Mike Briggs in the Sasol Beamer, alongside him de Villiers in Nissan Primera, row 2 van der Linde BMW and Taylor Audi, row 3 Moss Audi and privateer Dos Santos Nissan Sentra, row 4 Aberdeen Audi and Wabashki Toyota Camry, and completing the top 10 privateers Peters and Besaidnout. 20 laps around the tight Aldo Scribante circuit, and a nicely bunched field as they got the green light, with Briggs leading the charge to the right-hander at Luke Repko. A little argy-bargy with van der Linde locking up and making contact with de Villiers. Myrtle pushed wide, and through came Terry Moss into second, with van der Linde third, and Marco Dos Santos squeezed past Anthony Taylor. Through the Contiesas, Taylor and de Villiers were side by side, and it was a little crowded out there. An early wake-up call there too for Duncan Voss as well, with the second Nissan starting from the back of the field. Honda hairpin for the first time, and a great start for Terry Moss from 5th on the grid and towards the back of the field. An early off-road excursion for George Besaidnout. Race cam action is now from the Garth Wabashki DAW Toyota Camry, and ahead of him Mark Peters as the field streams through the Firehawk sweep for the first time. Up ahead of Peters and Wabashki, cars were carrying early battle scars, with George Besaidnout back in action with a Nissan Sentra also looking a little worse for wear. It's Sasol BMW, engine Audi, Sasol BMW, and then the chasing pack down the main straight. In a battle between privateers, Garth Wabashki was having a go at Mark Peters and came storming through on the inside at Luke Repko. Wabashki looked to have got that little move right, while at the front of the field, Briggs was reveling at leading a Bankfin touring car race in front of his home crowd. Behind him, teammate Van der Linde and Moss were locked in battle, with Van der Linde forcing his way ahead of the Audi through Hanger. Sasol BMs were now 1 and 2, with the 1994 touring car champion having to defend the inside line at the Honda hairpin as the 1996 champion tried to fight back. Terry Moss chasing after Sean van der Linde, with Privateer de Santos 4th and holding off the Taylor Audi. From 2nd on the grid, de Villiers was down to 6th and had Aberdeen climbing all over him. Anthony Taylor was trying to find a way around Marco de Santos, who grabbed his chance at the first corner to pick up a couple of places. On to the main straight, de Santos led a little train that included Taylor, de Villiers, Aberdeen and Wabashki, with Duncan Foss working his way through the field and moving ahead of Mark Peters. Race cam action from the Taylor engine Audi, and he never made much of an impression on the Duckham's Nissan down the main straight, but de Santos left the door wide open at Luke Repko. Taylor came charging up on the inside and going into the Conti S's. He had the better line for the exit of the corner. Briggs led the pack out of the S's, with Van der Linde and Moss in full chase, and as they emerged from the S's, Taylor had pushed de Santos back a place. In-car action now from the de Villiers BP Nissan Primera, with Chris Aberdeen filling his mirrors. Now it was the turn of the championship leader de Villiers and Aberdeen to try and find a way around de Santos, with Briggs, Van der Linde and Moss threatening to pull away from the trio. The BP Nissan Primera was trailing the rear fender, but that wasn't slowing de Villiers down at all. Through the Conti S's on lap 5, with the two Sasol Beamers of Briggs and Van der Linde still leading the engine Audi of Terry Moss. Two local drivers in the top 3 was keeping the crowd happy, with Taylor chasing after the leading trio in the second engine Audi. Janil de Villiers had also got past privateer Marco de Santos and was now up to 5th. Duncan Foss was still charging through the field and had a bird's eye view of a coming together at the Honda hairpin between Marco de Santos and Chris Aberdeen. That saw Foss pick up another 2 places, with Garth Wabashki and Mark Peters also benefiting as Aberdeen and de Santos try to sort themselves out and get back into the fray. Down the main straight in race order was Briggs, Van der Linde, Moss, Taylor, de Villiers and Foss ahead of privateers Garth Wabashki and Mark Peters. That was about to change at Luke Repko, with Sean van der Linde making a clean passing move on teammate Briggs to move into the lead. Briggs gave van der Linde all the room he needed and was in a position to ride shotgun on van der Linde, who was fighting for a top 3 place in the championship. Briggs hadn't won a race since joining the Sasol BMW team, but with van der Linde well placed in the championship, there was a hint of team orders behind the move. It was Briggs who had the 2 engine Audis breathing down his neck, and he was quick to defend the inside line at the Honda hairpin. While a fascinating battle unfolded up front, it was the end of the road for George Besaidnout, who finally called it a day after his lap 1 trials and tribulations at Hanger Bend. Lap 10, and Briggs was doing a marvellous job of holding up everyone else to allow teammate Van der Linde to storm off into the distance. With the Sasol BMW team looking for only its 2nd win of the season, these were sound tactics, and they were working. Janil de Villiers had forced his way past Anthony Taylor to move up to 4th, and Briggs looked perfectly prepared to take a lump or 2 if it meant keeping the pressure off teammate Van der Linde. He could expect a few bumps and bangs from hard man Terry Moss, with de Villiers also in the firing line where Taylor was concerned. This was a battle with huge potential for ending in tears, and looming up behind them and eager to add his penny worth to the proceedings was Duncan Foss in the 2nd Nissan Primera. Duncan Foss had done a good job of working his way through the pack from the back of the grid, and Briggs now led a 5-car train that included Moss, de Villiers, Taylor and Foss, who was now right up with the 2nd of the engine Audis. Voss again at a bird's eye view as de Villiers and Taylor exchanged pleasantries at Goodyear corner, and the potential for drama was increasing by the second. De Villiers and Taylor were still at it as they hit the main straight, and Luke Repko was going to be interesting. On the run down to the second gear corner at the end of the straight, Taylor pushed de Villiers wide, but in so doing left a gap down the inside. Voss tried to force his way through, but Taylor managed to hold on, and the big loser was de Villiers, who went from 4th to 6th in one easy move. Ahead of this trio, Moss was still climbing all over Briggs, and the two-time touring car champion in the Sassel Beamer was certainly earning his paycheck. It's good stuff from the race cam with Moss Audi, but something had to give in this battle, and the Honda hairpin was just the right place. Moss and Voss both went for the inside line, Briggs and Taylor the long way round. 4 into 2, just one go, and the almost inevitable contact, and that little lot saw the unfortunate Briggs emerge the victim. The Sassel BMW spun half into the infield, and by the time Briggs was mobile again, Moss and company were long gone, and there was an ominous smoke starting to pour from the front right wheel arch of the Sassel BMW. The main straight and race order was now van der Linde disappearing into the distance. The engine Audis of Moss and Taylor and the BP Nissan Primeras of Duncan Voss and Janil de Villiers. Briggs was limping his way back to the pits, with smoke now billowing from the right front wheel arch, and it was clear his race was over as he headed for the pits. As he pulled off, the trio of privateers, Peters, Wabanski and De Santos, stormed past. Replay action of the Briggs incident, and it's almost impossible to tell who got in the first nudge. Once the tail of the Sassel BMW started to step out, Briggs was dead meat. Briggs was missing from the Moss-Voss-Taylor-de Villiers battle, but the action was far from over. Taylor and Voss tangled in the Conti S's and were still swapping paint as they went through the left-hand kink and the right-hander at Hanger Bend. The driver was prepared to budge, and the crowd packed into the spectator area at the hairpin. They were treated to more action with heavy contact, this time between Taylor and Voss, who half-spun. That was all teammate de Villiers needed, and he was through like a flash to win back a place at the expense of Voss. It was all getting a little hectic out there with the Audis and the Nissan Primeras battered and bruised and looking a little worse for wear. Matters were also getting interesting in the battle of the privateers. After his early clash with Chris Aberdeen, a determined Marco De Santos had fought back and was now ahead of Garth Wabanski and pressurizing championship leader Mark Peters. Ahead of them, the two engine Audis still led the two BP Nissan Primeras, with championship leader de Villiers ahead of teammate Voss. At stake in this battle was a place on the podium, and through Luke Repko, the right hand at the end of the main straight, and through the Conti S's, de Villiers was all over the back of Taylor and looking for a way around the Audi. Back at Luke Repko, a fired-up Marco De Santos was also looking for a way around Mark Peters and got the Duckham's Nissan Sentra all crossed up, with this battle poised for an interesting finish. The penultimate lap with Sean van der Linde and the Sassel BMW cruising along with his second win of the season in sight. With no Briggs to protect him, van der Linde had lost ground to Terry Moss, but is in no danger. Moss also had a little cushion over de Villiers, Taylor and the Voss scrap, and it was here that it was going to be a fight to the finish. Taylor was the engine Audi meet in the BP Nissan Primera sandwich. With all the points they could muster, important issues for de Villiers and Voss. De Villiers needed his points to take a step closer to back-to-back championships, with Voss in second place under pressure from both race leader van der Linde as well as Moss. Down the main straight for the last time, and someone had to take the bull by the horns if there was going to be a change in race order amongst this quartet. It was Voss who decided that attack was the best policy, and he decided to take the fight to Anthony Taylor by going around the outside at Luke Repko. The pair were swapping paint again, but this time Voss had the inside line for the exit from the Conti S's, and with a final nudge that did not please Taylor one little bit, the BP Nissan driver was in front of the Audi man. Race leader Sean van der Linde was safely through the Honda hairpin for the last time, and in the Sassel BMW pit, they were getting ready for the celebrations. Behind him, battle was far from over, with de Villiers making a last-ditch effort to get past Moss and Taylor in the second engine Audi, who was trying to do the same where Voss in the second BP Nissan Primera was concerned. Out of Goodyear corner for the last time, and victory to Sean van der Linde in the Sassel BMW. Moss just managed to hold off de Villiers with Voss ahead of Taylor. Mark Peters held on to take the privateer honours, but it was van der Linde who was the man of the moment with generous praise for teammate Mike Briggs.
Michael made it very easy for me. He held the other guys up for lap after lap, and I managed to stretch my lead. Some stage I was, I think, almost 8 seconds in the lead. And I say thanks to Michael, he made it very easy for me.
The Bankfin Touring Car Championship at the Engine Audi race day at Aldo Scribante, with a huge crowd treated to some hectic motor racing in round 13. The parade lap and a quick refresher as we take a look at the grid with round 13 winner Sean van der Linde and a Sasol BMW and Duncan Voss Nissan Primera on the front row. Row 2 Moss Audi and de Villiers Nissan. Row 3 Taylor Audi and Privateer dos Santos in the Nissan Sentra. Row 4 Briggs BMW and Aberdeen Audi, and row 5 Privateers Mark Peters BMW and Garth Wabashki in the Toyota Camry as the field waited for the green light for 20 hectic laps of racing. Race cam action from the van der Linde BMW with Voss alongside him and tucked in behind the BMW with Moss Audi and de Villiers in the second BP Nissan Primera. The first corner is often the scene for touring car drama, but this time everyone was giving everyone else plenty of room. Moss and Voss almost touched on the entrance to the Conti S's, and a mistake from the Nissan driver saw him in a spot of bother as first teammate de Villiers and Anthony Taylor in the Engine Audi went past. Tucked in behind Voss were Chris Aberdeen in the third Engine Audi, Mike Briggs in the second Sasol BMW, and privateer Marco de Santos in the Duckham's Nissan Sentra. Through the Honda happened for the first time with race leader Sean van der Linde, closely followed by Terry Moss in the Engine Audi, with the pair fighting over third in the Bankfin Touring Car Championship. Behind Moss, championship leader and reigning champion Janil de Villiers. Fourth was Anthony Taylor in one of the 3 factory engine Audis as we pick up race cam action from the de Villiers Nissan Primera. That's as the leaders go into the sweeping right-hander at Goodyear that leads on to the main straight. Little coming together there between de Villiers and Taylor, but nothing serious as the field streamed down the main straight for the first time. The privateers were also locked in a ding-dong battle a little further back. Round 13 winner Sean van der Linde had 3 or 4 car lengths over Terry Moss, with de Villiers and Taylor in a dispute over third. The pair went through the Luke Repco right-hander side by side, but de Villiers had the better line for the entrance to the Conti S's, and Taylor had no option but to tuck in behind the BP Nissan Primera. No fireworks so far in this race, but it was early days with Aldo Scribante notoriously hard on tyres. Round 13 was a war of attrition, with the BP Nissans and other cars carrying battle wounds into this race. More race cam action from the de Villiers car as he shadowed former champion Moss, with de Villiers starting to look for a way around the Engine Audi. Through the Firehawk sweep, and this is a tricky section of Aldo Scribante with the suspension bottoming out and drivers having to change from second to third gear as they go through the corner. Next up is Goodyear corner with race cam action from the Taylor Audi. Taylor had lost a little ground on Moss and de Villiers, and right behind him was round 13 sparring partner Duncan Voss in the second BP Nissan Primera. Sean van der Linde still had a little cushion over Moss and the chasing pack, with leading privateer Marco de Santos down in 7th in the Duckham's Nissan Sentra. Down the main straight, Janil de Villiers found a terrific turn of speed from the BP Nissan Primera to move ahead of Moss, but he was a trifle late on the brakes at Luke Repco and ran a little wide. Moss stuck the nose of the Engine Audi on the inside of the Primera, and with a little nudge, was back in second spot. Race leader Sean van der Linde was looking comfortable out in front, but behind the Sasol Beamer there was plenty of scope for action in what was shaping into an Audi-Nissan fight with some hard men involved in the proceedings. Lap 6 out of 20 with Sean van der Linde and the Sasol BMW easing away from the pack. The big battle behind him was between Terry Moss and Anthony Taylor in the Engine Audis and championship leader Janil de Villiers in the BP Nissan Sentra, with Duncan Voss in the second Primera holding a watching brief. A clean overtaking maneuver at Luke Repco took Taylor past de Villiers and into third place behind teammate Terry Moss. The two Nissans were now 4th and 5th, and both de Villiers and Voss had a little work to do if they were to get ahead of the Audis. Race cam action from the de Villiers car, and his riposte where Taylor was concerned was quick and very clean. De Villiers sneaked through on the inside of the Audi at the Honda hairpin, and behind race leader van der Linde, it was again an Audi, Nissan Audi and Nissan train. The Moss, De Villiers, Taylor and Foss battle was another of those race situations loaded with potential for big disaster. With four tough men racing almost side by side, a little paint was going to be exchanged here and there, and Anthony Taylor had the best seat in the house as Moss and De Villiers went through Goodyear Corner side by side with a little contact between the two cars, almost inevitable. The BP Nissan Primeras are indecently quick in a straight line, and on the main straight, De Villiers simply left Moss for dead. Taylor was tucked in behind teammate Moss, but steaming up behind him was Duncan Foss, who tried his luck down the inside at Luke Repko. Again, there was contact between the two cars as Taylor fought off the Nissan, and the action was starting to hot up. Foss and Taylor had a full go at each other in round 13, with the pair now busy with a repeat performance. The two engine Audis were now sandwiched between the two BP Nissan Primeras, and next up were Chris Aberdeen in a third engine Audi, Mike Briggs in the second Sassel Beamer, and leading privateer Marco dos Santos in the Duckham's Nissan Sentra. Race leader van der Linde was still firmly in control, but when Taylor got himself into a spot of bother at Hanger Bend, it gave Foss the opportunity he wanted. He came up the inside of the Audi at the Honda hairpin with the two cars side by side on the run down to the Firehawk sweep. Through the sweep and on the charge to Goodyear Corner, the two cars were locked together, with Foss holding the advantage of the inside of the long right-hander that leads onto the main straight. Race cam action is from the Foss car, with Taylor forced to give way, but tucking in behind the BP Nissan as they hit the main straight. And again, there was a little contact between Audi and Nissan. More race cam action from the Foss car, and another demonstration of the Nissan Primera's straight line speed, with Taylor losing a car length or two on the run down to Luke Repko. And Taylor wasn't close enough to think of any heroics. Behind the pair, there was a little drama with Mike Briggs under a little pressure from Marco dos Santos way too late on the brakes. The Sassel BMW took a gentle off-road excursion, and that cost him a lot of places, and dos Santos and privateers Mark Peters and Garth Wodowski moved ahead of the hometown favourite. Around two-thirds race distance, with Sean van der Linde clear of Janil de Villiers and another gap back to Terry Moss in third. Moss was being chased by Duncan Foss, with Anthony Taylor losing ground to the BP Nissan Primera. Steaming up behind Taylor were leading privateers Marco dos Santos and Chris Aberdeen, and Mike Briggs, who was working his way back up the field after his off-road excursion. Briggs went past the third engine Audi at the entrance to the Conti S's with a little wave of acknowledgement to Aberdeen, who did not try to close the door on him. Still no major problems for race leader Sean van der Linde, although the gap between the Sassel BMW and De Villiers in the Nissan Primera was closing. Third place, Terry Moss, was coming under pressure from Duncan Foss in the second Nissan, with Marco dos Santos a solid fifth. Behind him came Briggs and Aberdeen, with Aberdeen not standing on ceremony when he went past the Sassel BMW at the Honda hairpin. The BMW's door mirror went flying, and this time the Briggs wave to Aberdeen was not quite so amicable, and the BMW man looking to try and return the compliment as quickly as possible as the pair stormed into the Firehawk sweep. The big battles on the racetrack were now those between the Moss engine Audi and Foss in the BP Nissan Primera, and the confrontation between the Aberdeen Audi and Briggs in the Sassel BMW. Coming onto the main straight, Aberdeen and Briggs were almost side by side, and on the run past the pits and down to Luke Repko, the Sassel BMW gradually started to edge away from the Audi. Race cam action is from the big Sassel BMW, and there was no late-braking problems for Briggs this time around, and he had done well to work his way back into fifth. Lap 17 out of 20, and the Moss-Foss battle was still gathering momentum, but for Anthony Taylor running in fourth place behind them, it was the end of the road. Taylor retired the engine Audi with a flat rear tyre. Bad luck for the Krugersdorp youngster, but most of the focus late in the race was now on Foss and Moss. The BP Nissan Primera got ahead of the engine Audi down the main straight, but on the tighter sections at Aldo Scribante, the Audi looked to have a slight advantage, and Moss, of course, knows every centimetre of his home circuit. Through the Conti S's, he was right on the Primera's rear bumper, and with a little nudge here and there from Moss, Foss was a little ragged, but through the kink and down to Hanger Bend, the two cars were side by side again. Great race cam action from the Foss car, with Moss ducking and diving behind him to try and sell Foss a dummy and force a mistake from the BP Nissan man. Moss is a past master at these tactics, and Foss was under huge pressure. Dos Santos and Briggs were still fourth and fifth, but Chris Aberdeen had picked up a problem and had now dropped behind privateer Mark Peters. Back back to the pit straight with the gap between Van der Linde and Geniel de Villiers still closing. Word from the Sasol BMW pit was that Van der Linde had picked up an exhaust problem with the BMW losing power. That and a 50-kilogram weight penalty for pole gave de Villiers a big advantage, and he was trying to make the most of it. Duncan Vos was still ahead of Terry Moss, but matters between the pair came to a head at the Conti S's. Race cam action is from the Moss car with solid contact taking both cars off into the Aldo Scribante fauna and flora. Moss was pointing in roughly the right direction and managed to get the engine Audi back onto the circuit ahead of Marco dos Santos with a fuming Vos still stranded. The clash between Moss and Vos did not cost the engine Audi driver a place, but moved leading privateer Marco dos Santos up into 4th. By the time Vos headed back to the black stuff, he dropped further positions to Mike Briggs and Mark Peters and was down in 7th. Replay action of the Moss-Vos incident, with the BP Nissan team later lodging a protest against Moss with the outcome still pending. Depending on which camp you support, you pays your monies and you takes your chances in apportioning the blame. The final lap with Sean van der Linde now under some serious pressure from championship leader Geniel de Villiers. Up ahead there were more problems for van der Linde. Ahead of him was a back marker, and de Villiers was able to take the opportunity to move even closer to van der Linde. It was going to be a tight finish, but most of the advantages lay with the Sasol BMW man. With less than half a lap to go, van der Linde still had that little cushion on de Villiers, but catching and then getting past are two completely different kettles of fish. If you listen carefully, you can quite clearly hear the manifold problem and the subsequent loss of power for the BMW here. Further back, Terry Moss was still holding on to 3rd place ahead of leading privateer Marco dos Santos, and in a sprint for the line, it was Sean van der Linde who wrapped up a double for the day. A terrific result for the Sasol BMW team, and van der Linde moved ahead of Moss into 3rd in the Drivers' Championship. Privateer honours went to Marco dos Santos ahead of Mark Peters and Garth Waberski, with everyone letting their hair down at the traditional post-race celebrations. Manufacturers' Championship, with Nissan still holding a massive lead over Audi, with BMW in 3rd, with 49 points now separating the two German manufacturers.